New Zealand's longest-serving indigenous forestry researcher is retiring, just shy of 50 years in the field. Scion scientist Greg Steward was farewelled by dozens of current and former colleagues at a special function at Te Wharenui o Tūteata this month to mark his retirement. He started his career 49 years ago after joining the New Zealand Forest Service as a trainee woodsman, and Greg Steward joins us now. Hi, Greg.
Hi, Jesse. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, and congratulations on a pretty illustrious career. You must be feeling very proud.
I am, actually. It's I guess this is the first or just into the second week of retirement, so still a period of reflection and adjustment, which will go on for a little while, I think.
Yeah. Can you give us a sort of a summary of your career, beginning, I think, in January 1975?
Yes, that's right. I was a fresh-faced 16-year-old leaving Manurewa High School in South Auckland. Parents dropped me off at Kaingaroa Village, which was an awful shock for a 16-year-old, joining, I think it was 50 other 16, 17 and 18-year-olds living in the middle of nowhere, learning how to do all of the forestry operations that we were intended to supervise. But as luck would have it for me, I, in my third year of training, ended up at what was then the Forest Research Institute in Rotorua and joined the indigenous forestry, or the indigenous silviculture section. And it's, looking back at it, it's probably a career that can't be repeated, because even in those days we were still converting native forests to agricultural use or to other exotic forestry uses. But we kind of went from that, and as societal and government priorities changed, through to looking at selection logging of native forest, and then through eventually to indigenous plantations and the potential to grow them again for new forest resources.
Any career highlights for you?
Probably two, I think. One of them was going to university to do a forestry degree when I turned 50, which was a bit of a shock to the system.
Mm-hmm.
Wandering around Canterbury University, feeling very old amongst all the 20-somethings.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think even 23-year-olds feel old if they go back and do that first year university a bit late. It can feel like a young person's game, but it was worth doing.
Very much so. Finding these wonderful people out there who had been doing what I thought was always possible, who then provided their plantings for me to do some measurements and then to do some modelling of how fast New Zealand kauri would grow in plantations. And it's interesting to see how just a couple of squiggly lines on a graph can help to change your thinking and help to change other people's thinking about what's possible in with New Zealand species. So that was one highlight. But that then gave me the confidence when I was invited to work with Ngāti Rehia in Northland around Tāko Bay, and they'd been talking with Minister Shane Jones about establishing a kauri plantation and a kauri sanctuary, and came to Scion to look for supporting advice, and we were able to provide a management plan for them. But I think most highlight for me was just actually meeting the people and being welcomed to the marae and being sort of taken right into the whānau.
Oh, fantastic. I don't know about that plantation up at Tāko Bay. I've spent a bit of time up in that part of the world. Where are they at with that?
Well, last I heard, they were implementing the management plan and were in the process of collecting seed and deciding which trees to collect from and to raise seedlings, and then to follow our management plan to establish the sanctuary. So it's on the other side of the Tāko River, across to where their marae is, and it's a very lovely piece of the country that you just don't get to go to unless you get invited in.
Yeah, and I've got to say there's a pretty posh resort just a little further north called Cody Cliffs, which gives an indication about how much of that species used to be there.
Exactly.
Is Cody a species that you sort of focused on in your career?
It was to start with, or kind of has been for quite a length of my career. Worked with a lot with the podocarps around the central North Island, the West Taupo forests of Tihoi and out towards Minganui and Te Urewera. But Cody became quite a focus for me as other people were working on tōtara and other species. So it's an easy species to fall in love with and to find a little niche for yourself in terms of doing research and meeting people.
What did you find out about Cody when you did your masters?
Well, we found out that when I talk about doing a degree, but it's always we. There's very little I in doing a lot of these studies. But when we looked at the growth rates, we were finding that planted Cody would grow anything up to 20 times more productive than Cody and natural stands. But what we had to realise, of course, was that the natural stands we were measuring weren't typical of what was here when people first arrived in the country. So we've got to keep looking forwards, but also reminding ourselves to look backwards to try and correlate, I guess, what we see with what we think probably was going on in the past.
Right. You discovered that if we were to plant with human hands, Cody, they would grow faster and bigger than some of the Cody we see out in the wild. However, we would only be replicating how things used to be originally. Am I paraphrasing you right?
To some extent, because what we haven't done with any of our native species is to go down the route, as we've done with the exotic forestry, of selecting better parents and breeding. So all the trees that I measured when I was doing my forestry degree were representative of the wild population, and sometimes we knew nothing about the parentage of what we were measuring. So we need to understand a lot more than what we still do currently. But certainly, if we were to go back and to find good sites and plant good seedlings, we would have karu that would be merchantable if you want to look at them in that light within 50 years or 60 years, which was, I think when I started, we were talking in forestry rotations of about 250 years. So, we've already made great leaps and bounds, but there's still a long way to go with all of these species.
You were talking about, was that word returnable, as in you could chop them down and use them for timber?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
But also you would also have in the landscape plantations which look an awful lot like natural stands, and I could take you to parts of Coromandel or Northland where the Forest Service planted trees in the 1950s, 60s and 70s that look like wonderful little natural stands until he starts to pick up the rows and the and see that they're actually planted stands.
Mm. Was Cody dieback a big part of your career?
It's always been something that people have said, well, why would you bother planting Cody when we've got this disease? But my answer has always been, well, we wouldn't actually be planting anything if we didn't take into account diseases. There's virtually nothing that we grow, be it grass, apples, cows, or whatever, that doesn't have a disease somewhere, somehow. So to put our native species onto the same footing as we do with everything else, then it becomes a problem to be solved rather than a problem that's insurmountable, in my opinion.
Do you foresee a time for New Zealand where we'll be looking at native timbers instead of pine plantations when we look at our forestry industry?
I would imagine that pine will be our sort of bread and butter for the industry for quite some time yet. But what is very apparent to me over the last 10 years or so is that some people are out there particularly mana whenua groups, looking for something different, to do something different with the land, something that resembled a little bit of familiarity to them from the past, but also gave them, people who use timber, the option of choice in terms of making cabinet furniture, interior fittings, those sorts of things where you would look for high value and great appearance qualities that perhaps you don't see in other species.
Yeah. Interesting. And we haven't talked about sort of biodiversity benefits of using indigenous forest instead of exotic forest. But yeah, it's the meaning it has for mana whenua, I guess, also another benefit. And then if you could show that it was growing at a comparable rate, that might really give the thing a boost. You'll be encouraging, no doubt, other young people to go into this area of forestry, indigenous forestry?
Absolutely. It's something that I've believed in for the last 50 years, nearly 50 years, and something I will take into the future with me. There's some young people coming through Scion and through other organisations who show a strong interest in this area. It's not something that's actively promoted in the industry or within the academic areas as strongly as I would like to see it, but really, it's like anything. You need the information sitting in front of you, and to have the faith to make the jump to do something a little bit different to what other people are doing. So absolutely, there's lots of people out there who could do this and want to do it, and there's absolutely a ton of people out there who are just dying for the information that could possibly come
out of interest, have you come across anyone who is planting kauri or another indigenous species for forestry as a plantation that's looking good at the moment or looking interesting to follow?
Actually, yes. We've had a contact from a person who is very interested in taking the species a little bit further south than what most people would think that kauri would normally grow at. So he's thinking of doing some planting in the South Island, and is contemplating a 19-hectare planting right now. Has already obtained the seed for it. Has got his nursery relationships in place, and will take a project forward. I mean, this is a person who's got a vision for the future, both for his own land, but for the country as a whole. And I really, really applaud him for it. It'll be a challenge, but like anything, it's a challenge that's worth having a go at. And I think he will do really well.
All right, I'll ask my producers to have a chat to you off here. Maybe we might be able to get that person on for an interview as well. For now, though, congratulations on 49 years in the forestry industry, Greg Steward, and we hope you enjoy retirement. I know you're going to be keeping a bit of a hand in at the same time, and so that your expertise isn't wasted. But thanks for spending some time with us today.
Thank you, Jess. Nice to talk.
Greg Steward, a tree scientist, retiring after just shy of 50 years in the field.